think we're running. See if we got any sound. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we got sound. So I think we're going. Okay. Alrighty. Well, as I looked at my notes and everything, first of all, I'll say the kids came in great. They were ready to work. They have a nice, pleasant attitude about the class, and it was very on time. The kids didn't screw around. They were basically on task throughout the lesson, I thought. So that was good. What did you think about some of the situations?
I did fill one of those out and watched as much of the video as I could. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me what you saw.
I agreed too. I thought that they entered pretty well. They usually get started on those problem of the days, or at least for yesterday, they were working on a weekly review that's going to be due at the end of the week. Then I thought we didn't have anything new to correct, but kind of reviewed, because the day before we had a couple groups of kids making different rectangles as people.
Oh, okay.
With bigger numbers, like 12 and 18. So she just did a smaller one just to reinforce that perimeter's the distance.
Did they, okay, now before you did that, you had your little, they were working on some kind of warm-up activity, the launch or whatever you call it. And was that a review of things to get ready for a test, or for Friday, something you're going to have them do? Or
those weekly reviews kind of review. It's like a spiral, so it might have ratios, fractions.
Okay, so it could be any topic, pretty much, and it's just kind of general review.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That one is, a lot of times the problem of the day is related to what we're doing, but I'm also trying to review because map testing's coming up.
Oh, sure.
So I want to make sure they remember some of those skills.
That's important.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so yes, the learning target. And I recall you saying something about your job today is to, and then you explained about a garden, and you explained even the perimeter, and that they were to find the minimum and maximum size that a garden could be based upon a perimeter. So, okay. Now, I want to show you something here, if I can get it on. I tried to get it, it doesn't matter. I got to go through. Let's see what happens here. This is, I'll get to it. Here we go. We're up to the part where the kids are standing in the perimeter, and I'll just leave it as a picture. Okay. If I'm a student in the audience, what shape do those students show me?
Look like a circle.
That does not look like a circle to the students sitting in the audience.
Oh.
It looks like a line.
Oh.
Because we're flatland there.
Right.
We're not above them.
Right.
So that, and I understand, I think if you have kids doing it, they themselves see that they're in a circle or they'll be in a square or something.
Yeah.
But the audience sees.
I think with so few kids, but we just kind of went through it as a warm-up. So once we got up there, I was like, we should add a bigger number.
Yeah.
Because when we had like 12, and everybody did it the day before.
I think then you have, then I think
you could see
helps.
It's longer. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it kind of looked like a mess.
Well, well, I won't say it's a mess, but and the kids love to go up there and participate. There was no question about that. But I think that the kids probably understood what you were doing because of yesterday or the day before.
Right.
But from just a viewing standpoint, it really doesn't show what you wanted it to show.
Yeah.
Now, I call that. Actually, I used to call something about hearing what you say as your ear. Have your student ear. When you're teaching, you want to listen to yourself to, as you say words like brainstorm, you want them to understand that, okay, that was good. You listen to yourself, but at the same time you also have to see from the student's perspective what you're showing to ask, and then ask yourself the question, does that really do it? Does that show me that? So that was one minor, it's minor, it's easy fix. But I think, excuse me, I think it needs, that's just something to consider is what do the kids see? What am I showing them if I'm using a visual? So, okay. So you were to, let's see, the PowerPoint was used for the task of the day, but it looked very nice. and it was understandable. The students worked in groups too, collaboratively they did. They had the grid paper. At cleanup, oh, okay, you say that cleanup took longer than expected. So the real reflection will take place today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can understand that. Yeah, time always is our enemy.
Yeah.
So yes, it would be interesting to find out when you get a chance how well they know it, I guess,
Right.
would be the question. And you'll find that out today. Miss Russell will find out today for you, I suppose.
Yeah. I think while they were working, that
Mhm.
it may have seemed louder or whatever, but I think
Wasn't bad.
when you would go around to the groups,
Mhm.
I think they were all really trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And sometimes a stronger student knew, so
Mhm.
then the three of us were trying to get the one that we probably knew had the answers but didn't know
Oh,
how to
sure.
do it,
Mhm.
to explain it. And
Mhm.
a lot of them were pretty honest and they didn't know how,
Okay.
so we helped them and then
Mhm.
come back again and explain it. So I think the learning that happened, I really think they learned more about the perimeter and
Sure,
area.
sure.
think,
I would
doing
not
that.
disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
The activity itself, what you're trying to have them do, of course, was figure out this garden.
Mhm.
And also to figure out that a fixed perimeter can vary in area
Mhm.
based upon the dimensions,
Mhm.
length and width. For a student who is a visual learner, would they have found that a bit, from the instruction that they received yesterday, would they have had a good understanding as to what you were trying to accomplish for them? Someone who's a more concrete learner, as opposed to someone who's maybe a little more abstract?
With just the directions
Well, the
or when
basic
they were
direc-
figuring
Yeah,
it
the
out?
basic directions, most of the directions were verbal.
Yeah.
And you wanted them to make a rectangular shape, and that rectangular shape had to be a perimeter of 24.
Mhm.
At the
I see.
end, you had them take grid paper and cut out areas that had a perimeter of 24. You had the one by what, 10 or 11?
Yeah.
1 by 11, and you had the 6 by 6. But to me, you might have had a kid who isn't very good in math or very good visually learning would maybe find that difficult to have
To
comprehended.
write down the steps.
Yeah, because as you were teaching, you would have, okay, this is step 1, and everyone does step 1, but they didn't
Mhm.
know what step 2, step 3, and step 4 might be yet.
Yeah,
And then you say, okay, everyone, we'll do step 2. It might have been good to outline that ahead of time
Yeah.
for the better learners.
Yeah.
And for the slower learners, they would have had it, but then they'll still need you to come through and help
Yeah.
them along.
I was thinking of that as I was actually teaching it, that
Okay.
I think, I don't know if I commented or I know when I was thinking that I had to stop often and
Sure.
reiterate what they were to do,
Mhm.
or,
Well, I
you
think.
know, and so I've done that
Well-
before, and I think I probably, especially for this class, should have
Mhm.
been, 1, list your length and width.
Mm-hmm.
2,
Yeah, and
You know,
hopefully you'd write
put
it
it
on
in
the
a
board.
table. Yeah,
Or give them but
right,
on something that they can refer to. If it's on the board, that's fine, or on a PowerPoint, that's fine. But
Yeah.
here are your steps today.
yeah.
Now, and we know that it's the distance around something.
Mhm.
As I'm cutting my square, I'm cutting an area with the sides, which
Mhm.
should add up to a perimeter, but I don't know if they know what the actual perimeter is. And of course, you're going to find out today. You didn't
Mhm.
have time,
Yeah.
and so on.
We were gonna put tape on the floor too, so they
Oh,
get it. I
good.
mean, they have the little
Mhm.
pictures,
Yeah.
but since this was feet, like you had
Yeah,
said, the
yeah.
floor, and do a 1 by 11, and then compare that to a 6 by 6, so that it's
Mhm.
the same dimension as the boards, to
Yeah.
see the difference. Because then the other classes too, when we look at, like, the smallest area was 11 and the largest is 36, that it's
Mhm.
amazing that it's 3 times as big, or
Oh,
as
yeah.
you get a bigger perimeter, I mean, it can be 4 and 5 times as
Mhm.
big, but you have the same material.
Same material.
So,
Yeah.
that's,
So I went home
Good.
last night and came up with a little object here. I just ripped up some wood.
oh, cool.
And, let's see, maybe I should move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, well, you can kind of tell it's a grid, and it has a ribbon that's your perimeter of 20. I measured it to be 24 inches.
That's neat.
And the idea being, I'm thinking, if I'm a kid that doesn't understand too much about what a perimeter is,
Right.
now I have a physical perimeter. It's the ribbon. And now, of course, you have the flexibility to say to the kids, just find all the different sizes or shapes that you want to, choose. You can, and so you could have one down here, of course. Now this only goes to 10. It's not 11. The paper wasn't big enough. You have to press a little hard. That might be hard for the kids to do because this wood's a little hard. But then
You'd have a 2.
you'd want to go about to 2. And maybe up here. And it's close. I wouldn't say it's perfect. But now, if I'm a kid who's not very abstract in my thinking, I now can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2. And I can also know that the ribbon didn't change its length, hopefully,
Right.
if they're thinking.
Right.
The ribbon didn't change. Now I can write down, okay, we tried that one. What's its area? If I'm not very good at math, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 20, whatever that is, and count it, okay? So that'd be 10, it actually is 10 times 2, so it'd be 20. And then they could say, well, what would it look like if I went down 1? And they could see that, well, you'd have to go over here and
Have to make it wider.
have to make it wider and try to make it even, and then hopefully they could get to that even point. I haven't tried this myself, but it's going to be about, once they get it pressed in there. And you need these big thumbtacks because a small one would never work.
Yeah.
Now they can do that, and yet they know that the ribbon is still 24.
Right.
And they now can measure their area and count it. That's real simple, but for the low-level kids, especially the special ed kids that you have in the room, that would be real helpful to them.
I have my 6th hour class who, but they're brighter.
Okay.
So we're usually a step ahead or do a little bit different activity. And the day before we used string.
Oh, good. Yeah,
we
string
did use
would be better.
string.
Yeah, couldn't find string.
But I didn't tie it together like this, which would have been a good idea.
Oh, okay.
So they were trying to just,
Yeah,
and then they
yeah.
didn't have anything to keep the corners of it.
Sure.
And so I had asked Miss Russell about that. I explained the string, and it was kind of a mess. But I said, I have geo boards, but that doesn't have this on it unless you put grid paper over it. I mean, it has
Sure.
the dots, but it doesn't give you the
Yeah,
X's.
yeah.
And she had said to maybe just use those squares that we did, the cubes, to build the
Yeah.
outside. But I get that they're not as linear as the string
Sure,
is or whatever, so
sure.
it looks like it takes up area.
It's a little
but-
tough to do the string measurement. It's not hard. What I finally did was I had to take, because you want to mass produce this, and believe me, the
Yeah.
ribbon is hard to tie.
Yeah.
But I measured from one corner, well, I guess it was from this point to that point, I measured 12 inches exactly. And then I wrapped the ribbon and tied the string as tight as I could and made it that. So this is close. It can't be perfect, nothing's
Right.
perfect. But it's close. I had
That's
a
a good
dickens of a
idea.
time with the grid pattern on the computer.
Yeah.
Finally, I got it to be 1 inch by 1 inch.
I
But
do
at
sometimes
first,
too.
it wasn't, and because it wasn't, the ribbon wasn't working. The dimensions weren't working out. But eventually I figured that out, and we got that. Now I made about 25, 30 copies of this, and we have 3 more of these.
Oh,
So I'm going to
awesome.
be giving those to you
Thank you.
to have, and you can.
That's cool.
One side you can write, I guess, on it, and one side you got that.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
now, you got kids that are in special ed, or you got kids that aren't too sharp with what's a square corner. Well, the grid helps you. But now you might have kids that are really high functioning. What would you want to do for them given this circumstance?
And have them use this or not?
They could
it?
use the board, yeah. I would take the grid off. Because in the real world,
We'll have them
they,
draw to the different ones?
I would give them a ruler, because in the real world, you'd get a tape measure or something. Now they might want to get a right angle, something that's right angular. That's fine, a square or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or just learning, they might just have to learn it geometrically, how a square works.
Yeah.
And do it without the grid, because now they must do it more real world like. For the kids that don't have the kids that don't need the grid because they're smarter. Tougher problem is what it does.
Right.
They would have to measure, but then they also have to get it at squares, at right angles. And I wouldn't tell them how to do it unless you absolutely had to. I would say, here's your field. Give me the largest 24-inch, 24-foot shape that you can get out of this perimeter, and see if they can come up and do that. But that would be a way to differentiate. And of course, the special ed kids, you give them the grid. You might even give them. You might even I don't know. You might even put pins in specific places so they don't have to try to manipulate it. You know, sometimes it kind of depends on what they do. Go ahead.
Well, this just gave me the same idea if I had, which I have a lot of string.
Oh, sure.
That if you made them 24 feet, that these could be kids at least on the floor.
Yes,
since they're
absolutely.
squares.
Or you could go outside and
So
do
they
it
could
that
have,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, the kids.
Like those
that would
are
be
about
great.
1 foot, so they could
Yeah.
have visualized that way too.
So if you had some spots out on the courtyard area, or on the grass out there, they could become, you could put a kid in each corner and have a rope, and pretty soon they're actually measuring out the size of the garden, so they really see it.
Yeah.
Finally, because you did talk about the lumber, or the using wood for raised beds.
Yeah.
That could be something we could also do. I mean, you just write me up a requisition, you need some lumber, and I get you the lumber.
I've thought about that out back where we walk
Sure.
in, because it's always muddy, but they plow specifically
Yeah.
off the sidewalk.
Yeah.
But I thought if we built a garden there, it'd be nice.
Oh,
Better than the mud, but
Sure.
they always plow
Well,
it. So.
we'd have to, you'd come and talk to me, we'd work something out. The custodians, they'd work it out with you.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that would be a nice joint project, I guess, with a science teacher.
Yeah.
Have the kids do that and make a little garden 6x6 or something. That isn't going to hurt anything.
No, that'd
So,
be easy to do.
and the kids would then see the actual process.
Right.
Part of the process would be, kids, how do you know that? And of course, if you're using lumber, you always have a little overlap. When you butt lumber up, there's going to be 1.5 inches or
Right.
something. Well, that hasn't been taken into account here.
Right.
So it's even more real world problematic at that point. So the higher level kids probably should be given the hardest problem, which is, here's a space, you figure out how to do it. Pretty much is what you do.
Right.
While you're working with the other kids and see if they can come up with
Yeah.
it. So that's this is a way that allows them to visually see a perimeter, because it's physical, and then they can then figure out the area as well.
Right.
Now, after they've done this, you don't want to keep them on these forever and a day.
Right.
You want to move them on to the calculations, and hopefully they will see that. But yeah, I'll let you have these. But yeah, that was one of the things that I was thinking. How could this lesson be more visual for the kids? And I think that would be the way, at least one way to do it. Then let's see. You talked about a fixed perimeter, which we talked about, and the dimensions. Of course, the kids have to know what the word dimension is, and I think they do.
Yeah.
You've worked with that.
Or when I mention it, then I'll be like length and width. So even though you keep talking about it,
Oh,
because I
sure.
know like vertices too. When we were just finished plotting points in the coordinate plane, they didn't really know. But if you'd say the point, and then vertices
Yeah.
or the corner, and then as they
Yeah.
were plotting them, that eventually they learned a word that they didn't have to just have the definition for. But-
Yeah,
So- But yeah.
As much as possible in the lesson, especially for the more able kids, I would get them front-loaded with, here are the basic steps you have to do, and give them the problem. And not check on them well, you check on them, but you don't really have to give them too many hints. Then for the other kids that really need the help, you can work with them, and that's fine. But there should be, for example, because you asked them to do all the different integral dimensions of the shape, I don't know if they knew why they were doing it at the time. You were wanting them to see, here's the smallest area, here's the largest area, but don't skip anything in between. And I would say that's perfectly fine to work with, especially the lower level kids. For the upper level kids, I'd say, find the largest area of this shape. You figure it out. And see if they can come up with a 6x6 square or not. Some might and some might not, but in the real world, you get it wrong, you get it wrong.
And that's the direction that my other classes went to today too, with having done that for a couple of days. We did a brownie situation too instead of just that one. And
like
so
cutting up a.
Well, if you have, I always said, like, if you just had a string that was whatever 10 inches long, that you could go home and show them, I'm only going to get a piece this big, showing them the long skinny one, but then if you made it square. So we kind of did that. Done today, some of the problems were like, you just have 400 feet of fencing and you want the maximum dog pen.
And again,
then what would you do? So it doesn't then ask them. But I see what you're saying is to do that right away with the kids that are more capable.
Yeah, give them the problem solving. Give them the chance to encounter all the problems, because that's primarily what they need to do. Is we maybe spoon feed those kids to the extent that they really don't have to think as hard as they probably are able to. And yet the other kids, certainly, if you said to them, you have 400 feet of fence, figure out the shape of the field. Number one, they don't know anything. But the able kids should start thinking it through and do that. And how do they do it? I would say, I don't know. Let them suffer a little bit or struggle, Make them go through the struggle.
That's one thing that is hard for kids, because I think they're used to immediate attention and like the next step. So it's
Now, my granddaughter, last night, I made this thing for winding up a kite. But I also saw this behavior a couple weeks ago too. She cannot, of course she's 5, she cannot accept any criticism. She's either perfect or she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And I suppose all 5-year-olds kind of go through this at some point. So last night I said, here's the kites thing, wind it up, but you have to keep your hand on the handle and your other hand on the crank so it doesn't go out when the wind's blowing. And for some reason or other, she didn't like that. And says, I'll never use this again. And she gave it to me and off she went. Because she's 5 years old and she's not capable of solving that problem, apparently. And maybe I just didn't do a good job. But she's not capable of accepting that you need help, or she's just not capable of encountering frustration, at least not for her at this point. And that's something they need to learn. So a 12-year-old should be being frustrated. And so, like I said, I would make it, for the top kids, none too simple. And like I said on this, if you're doing this, I would say take the grid paper off and say, I don't know, you tell me. And that's a pretty tough proposition without the grid paper. So,
back to kind of the reaction of my granddaughter with one of the classes that I'm taking for my master's. It's like the growth mindset and fixed mindset. I don't know, we've gotten some stuff with our math too about it, and I think it's finally coming back to the generations of parenting that was like, good job, you did, and more focused on saying, I like the effort that you put into it, because otherwise kids tend to think like they're smart or not smart, but that is really more about effort or attitude and not just a more general praise statement that's more specific.
We've spoiled her with praise to the extent we've made this little monster.
Well, not her necessarily, but you know how, I think kids feel bad if they're not successful.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's okay,
yeah.
because
Oh,
that's
my
how
goodness.
you learn, is by your mistakes.
She
But
had
I
a
think-
nothing more than a cardboard box, and whatever it was, and I don't know what the problem was, but it wasn't right. And throw the box away and have a little, fit about the fact that she's never going to use that box again. And
Yeah.
everyone's saying it's okay, but oh, she's just going through the
Devastated.
drama of it. So, well, let's look here. So I kind of think, you covered fixed perimeter, but I think the visual would help.
Mhm.
Being able to change the direction, dimensions is good. And then finding the everyday example, which you didn't have as much time yesterday to really get into.
Right.
So that would be it. But now, you're probably saying, well, I don't have access to the wood or something. If you need something, half the time we can find it. I can find a whole bunch of lumber in the back of the stage.
Oh, see, I was.
It's all free. So, if you need something, just ask, and
Okay.
you'd be surprised what we might
What
be
we
able to
have
come
around.
up with, so.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. The launch was good. The only other thing I would say is we covered, it took a long time, but the kids were trying to figure it out, and they had several questions and problems to cover. So I could understand you didn't quite get to the end of the lesson.
Yeah.
It was just laborious to get to that point.
Right.
And,
I thought with the little bit that we did, a day of it, that it wouldn't have taken them as long to come
Yeah.
up with the dimensions. So also in that, I wanted to
Mhm.
stop and share more, but instead of doing that, because kids were
Yeah.
at different places,
Sure.
we just kind of explored and made sure they understood in small groups instead of sharing large groups, which will happen again
Sure.
more today if she feels comfortable.
Well,
Otherwise, I'll do that
yeah.
tomorrow with them. But
And if you get it, yeah, I would say do a little more front loading,
yeah,
so that you can then back away and walk around and help them individually, but everyone has the basic plan to know what they need to do.
well, and I thought about that too, about typing up like
Oh,
step
okay.
1 and 2 and giving it
Sure.
to them, and then. I mean, I understand that they need it because sometimes they don't, but
Sure.
also they're so bad. Some of the kids at just
Mhm.
following the listening
Sure.
directions, even the
Mhm.
ones that I think are capable,
Sure.
not the ones that have trouble.
Mhm.
But so I thought, well, I'll just put, it wasn't
Yeah,
it wasn't the steps, but on the PowerPoint
Mhm.
side that was up there, it was the finished product where it needed to
Mhm.
go. But it wasn't, like you said, the steps of do the dimensions
Yeah.
first, then put it on the table, and then because that was visual.
And
or
what you
verbal.
could do, if you wanted to, again, for those that need the steps more laid out, give that to
Provide it,
them.
yeah.
For those that really you want them to figure it out on their own,
Right.
just say at the end of this, then give them the objective of, this is what I want at the end. Don't give them all the steps, just say, this is what you need to have at the end, and see if they can come up with that.
Right.
That would be pretty good
hard
for them,
for
and it's
yeah.
very much in keeping with, what is that new test, Smarter Balance Test, I
Right,
believe?
yeah,
Very much in
Smarter
keeping
Balance
with that.
Test.
I don't
Yeah.
know if we'll ever go to that test, but.
Yeah.
but
They have
I've-
some good
I've
tests,
looked
though.
at that.
I've been getting some off
Mhm.
of, they have sample ones.
Oh, good, yeah,
Yeah, they're fun.
that was good.
They're fun.
All in all, I think they accomplished their goal yesterday. I think it could be improved, which is fine, just by utilizing some manipulatives like that.
Right.
And the other thing I would say is, you covered the objective. I heard it. I knew it was being stated. I don't know if the kids knew it as well as, maybe they did. They were doing things, but was there ever a time, I didn't catch it, that you checked with kids, what are we doing now? What are you trying to accomplish now? Maybe you're at a group and say, what is your what are you trying to accomplish here? Because it's
Right.
always important to find out if they know what they're doing.
Right.
That might be another thing to do. Just,
Yeah.
it's the checking all the time.
Yeah, because usually I just checked on how did they know
Yes.
the length and width, but
Yeah.
not the overall.
Well,
I see that
kids,
would be,
kids typically want to just give me the answer.
right.
What they need to understand is the answer is a fleeting thing. What they need is the process.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to get them to understand is, here's the process. So what are you trying to do is the process.
Right.
I often, in the classroom, and I used to teach with Phil too, but I would stop after 10 minutes of class and say, "What are we doing?" And of course, it was like deer in the headlights.
Right.
Nobody knew. No one would raise their hand. And then I would go into this, "You mean to tell me," I would get real dramatic, and I've been away at the chalkboard, and they're all at this time, "What is wrong with the lass?"
Yeah.
But then, the next day I would do the same. About the same reaction. About the third day, the hands shot up. They knew I was coming. So then they were listening to things like that. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anything
point,
else you
too.
want to, before I lose my voice here?
Um,
Excuse me.
no, I'm.
Well, I'll let you have this stuff because you deserve
Okay.
to work with it. You
Thank
can
you.
use string. I didn't have string. I had ribbon. And I don't have these thumbtacks, but I'm sure
Yeah.
we've got somewhere around here.
Yeah. Okay.
But these are the ones to use because the other ones wouldn't really work too well.
Wouldn't go in as easily. Thanks.
And I got a bunch of that grid paper too. I could give you. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my leaving thought would be, what does the kid see or understand through either visual or auditory means? What is it
Right.
that they're getting, and is it understandable to them as they're trying to work the problem? So it's getting in
Yeah.
their mind.
Yep.
Is the thing. So.
I agree.
Okay.
Thanks
Well,
for
I
the
appreciate
pointers
it.
that you gave me.
Oh, that's
They're all
okay.
good ones.
I enjoyed being in your class. Like I said, the kids are good kids.
Yeah.
You've got a good.
Kids.
I thought the co-teaching was excellent. With the associate, with Miss Roos, all of that worked out really well. It's very
Yeah.
smooth. I've been in co-taught classrooms, and it's the teacher's doing all the work, and I've got either a para or I've got a second teacher who is acting like a high-paid para.
Yeah.
And there's very little activity going on. We can't afford to allow
Yeah.
them not to be involved.
Right.
And I was very pleased to see how you're operating with both.
Yeah.
They-
a lot of times
there's a
they
lot
do
of-
better in small instructions, so
Sure.
just because they pay attention better too.
That's exactly right. But they had comments and back and forth throughout the lesson that I thought helped, and you helped them
Yeah.
when Ms. Russell was teaching. You kind of gave a side comment that helped
Yeah.
explain too. So
Yeah.
that's what I'd like to see. So that was great. Okay,
Okay. Thanks.
you're very welcome. You have a good day.
You too. No, I don't think, Lori maybe didn't say anything, but I don't think she's coming back. She's got a different job, and she
Oh,
is
I
an
didn't know
amazing
that.
para, so.
Yeah.
She took or is going to do a full-time job, something with,
Oh, gee, I hate to hear that.
Staff, Stacy.
Oh,
They
okay.
have some
You're gonna go in there.
bagging company or
Oh,
something.
okay.
So,
Well, if they have
Yeah.
to do it, that's understood, but
yeah. You don't have to.
No.
She knows. She toes the line, she helps out.
yeah, I would
steps
say,
right in.
it's probably basically it's the money, I'm sure. Where
Yeah.
she's going to, because I think what she does here is just that
Yeah.
you gotta think outside of the money sometimes. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want that email too, or just a paper copy? I can email that, the first thing that I wrote,
That would be fine.
the video reflection. It
Yeah.
says-
Would you do that? That would be great. That would be good. To Mr. Olson too, if you email it to me,
Okay.
so that'd be great.
All right.
Have a nice day.
You too, thanks.
Oh, it's cough.